I love dancing. I love most of all writing songs.
What's up, YouTube? I saw this video once. POV working in a record store, you can always count on selling at least one copy of Rumors every day. And based on this knowledge, I thought to myself, I wonder how many record stores have continued to exist solely based on Fleetwood Mac. We could talk for hours about how each member of that band provided something unique and different with all of their collective otherworldly talent. They were almost like a supergroup, a collection of people for whom this wasn't their first project. They'd all done it before, whether it was Christine's prior years as solo singer Christine Perfect, John McVie and Mick Fleetwood's time in John Mayall and the Blues Breakers, or their early work with Peter Green. Not to mention Lindsey Buckingham touring with people like Don Everly and creating his first ever record with his then girlfriend Stevie Nicks. If you dig learning about women in music history, do me a solid and click the like and subscribe buttons. Thanks. Fleetwood Mac were great, one of a kind, and as much as it must have irked the other band members, especially when publications like Rolling Stone came calling to put her on the cover alone and not them, Stevie would always rise above as the superstar that she was meant to be. It was a combination of things. The 70s was the first real era where aesthetic was almost as important as the music, and Stevie Nicks knew exactly how to use this to her advantage. She dressed differently than everybody else, like a 19th century hippie witch of some kind. She wore this vintage top hat that made her look like the conductor of a great rock and roll orchestra. She liked antiques and vintage things from the 20s and 30s, the same way that we like things from the 60s and 70s today. And what's hilarious about this is that her whole aesthetic is so highly associated with witches and bohemianism, but when you actually look at the garments that she's wearing, they're pretty much all inspired by the 1920s flapper look, with those like uneven lacy hems and the high lace-up boots, shawls, head wraps. That was all 20s before it was 70s. Anyways, she thought of herself as an old soul, and this comes across when you look at old interviews with her. There's something so confident and casual about her. She gives off this feeling of safeness. Her voice is so soft and bewitching when she speaks, but then she gets on stage and it's this totally different, explosive singing voice. You look at Stevie and you want to be her, you want to be around her, you want to do the things she does and like the things she likes, because she's so confident and so radiant. And I think it's that confidence that kept her alive in all of those years when she was struggling so hard with the substance abuse. She always knew she'd be famous, she always knew she would survive. And it's inspiring to see someone so sure of themselves and so welcoming and warm, even through the mask of fame that was placed before her. Stevie had a lot of influences, of course, people like the legendary Joni Mitchell and Janis Joplin. Buffy St. Marie was a huge influence to her, but she also loved Motown music and country music. And all of this can be heard through the thread of her songwriting. Yes, she suffered from a string of addictions, and there are endless stories about her cocaine use and all kinds of other issues related to her partying too much. It was an incredibly easy mistake to make for someone in her position. We've seen it dozens, maybe hundreds of times. She wasn't the first, she wasn't the worst, and she wasn't the last. And now that the decades have worn on and she's now in her 70s, it's just kind of boring at this point. And while we're talking about boring, old, overplayed stories, a lot of the videos that you'll see about these epic women in the music industry are centered around the men that were in their lives. You're never gonna see a list of men that someone dated on this channel. I'm never gonna reduce someone as incredible as Stevie Nicks to the number of notches on her bedpost, whether they be famous people or not. What all of that boils down to is she was young, she was very famous, and she had a great time. I don't know if underrated is the right term, because how can you call someone underrated when they created masterpieces like Rhiannon and Landslide? But there is this thing in music history where we tend to lean on men as the greatest and the legends when it comes to intellectual pursuits like songwriting. Women are more readily accepted as epic performers or aesthetic beauties or talented singers than actual songwriters, despite the many examples of epic female songwriters blowing away their male competition for years. But that's a whole other video. But I do think that Stevie has been a victim of those generalizations, because if you want to get real about it, Stevie Nicks and Christine McVie were the two most capable songwriters in Fleetwood Mac. No shade to Lindsey or Mick, I know they're amazing, and I definitely love me some Lindsey Buckingham songs, and I think he's actually kind of an underrated guitar player. But Christine and Stevie's songs, those were different. Consider Landslide, maybe one of the most beautiful songs ever written, and one of her earliest for Fleetwood Mac. She was just living with Lindsay at the time. They were struggling to make a career for themselves, and she looked up at the snow-covered mountains of Colorado and was inspired to write a song. She was determined to be a star. Or Rhiannon, the story of a mystical witch that Stevie became interested in after reading a book about her. She later found out the story about the Welsh goddess Rhiannon and thought the lyrics fit pretty well. Or Dreams, that she wrote in an hour sitting on Sly Stone's bed in his studio space, about the end of her relationship with Lindsay, with whom she was forced to work and travel and live with as members of Fleetwood Mac for decades. Then her solo work, Edge of 17, this upbeat, danceable rock song with these dark, poignant lyrics, inspired by the passing of her uncle to cancer right before her eyes, and the assassination of John Lennon, both events which occurred within weeks of each other. I talk about this song in more detail on TikTok if you want to go check that out. What do all of these songs and more have in common? They dig deep, they climb inside your soul. That draws you into a story and makes you see the imagery she's describing and feel the emotions that she's expressing. She uses a lot of double meanings, metaphors, cryptic phrases. She makes you think and feel with her words and the way in which she delivers them. She's this truly rounded artist with a legacy for the ages. Now, if only I could afford Stevie Nicks tickets. Thanks so much for watching, friends. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.